Mark Siegel. I'm the author of Sailor Twain, or The Mermaid in the Hudson. Now, Sailor Twain is a graphic novel. It's about 400 pages. It's done entirely in charcoal. It takes place in 1887 on the Hudson River on a steamboat called the Lorelei. And one night the captain of this steamboat finds a wounded mermaid hanging from the side of his ship. And then you could say his life takes a turn for the strange. And now there are other characters that come into this story. Many of them seem to have some connection to this mermaid, and there are mysteries to unravel as the story goes. There's basically 3 love stories interwoven in this tale. You could say there's 2 central men in the story, and then 3 women if you count the half-fish type. And it harkens back to the serial novels of the 19th century. There's hints of Melville and Conrad also, but of course Mark Twain haunts the story. The captain is called Elijah Twain, but he has no relation to the writer. In fact, he grumbles when people ask him if he's related. He says that's not his real name, you know. So anyway, there are many side characters, and we go on this steamboat pretty much the whole time on this steamboat in the course of a summer, up and down the Hudson River from Manhattan to Albany and back, and various points along the way. And we're in 1887, which is this very interesting time in American history. The shadows of the Civil War are still hanging over the country. The early feminist movement is fighting for its life and fighting against incredible scorn and derision, and inseparable from basically the black freedom movement, what would become the civil rights. So all this plays into this rich mix of a story. And then, of course, there's the story of this captain who makes perhaps not the wisest choices in his life. And through that is a contemplation about what it is to be a man, to be faithful, to be wholehearted. So Sailor Twain started as it always started as a book first, but at a certain point I decided to try serializing it online. And there's an incredible explosion happening right now in the webcomics world, which mostly has been under the radar of conventional publishing. But the numbers of readers are just staggering. And I didn't know very much about webcomics, but I was interested in the 19th century serial novels, you know, starting with like Harriet Beecher Stowe, and then of course Melville and many others, you know, broadcast huge numbers and reached a huge audience through these serials. And everybody knows about, you know, readers flocking to the docks to get the next installment of Dickens, right? Great Expectations and things. So I was curious. I thought this story could lend itself to a kind of a serial approach, and it wasn't really going to happen in print. So the webcomic thing happened. And then all kinds of magic started happening because of doing it that way. As it turned out, about 800,000 unique readers followed it. And the magic was, for me, the first magic was the process itself, which was, you know, I had a story. I've worked on this book for about 9 years, and it's, you know, I had the story in command, so it wasn't really being steered by the readers, but there was this interaction at many levels. So there was, for example, some people who were history buffs, steamboat geeks, people correcting the pistons in my engine room or the width of the floorboards in the captain's cabin, literally. And I would go back in and I would fix, you know, wherever I hadn't done my homework. But other things started happening which were really interesting. Was an onboard conversation developed, and they started calling themselves fellow Twainers. At one point there was a crowd scene I was working on. I think it was the ball. There's a ball on the ship. And on the lark I said, hey, you know, I've got a lot of faces to draw. Send me a photo if you'd like to have a cameo on board the ship. And right then and there, about 75 photos just drop into my mailbox. And then they've kept coming. Even now, the book is done. It's in stores, and I still every so often get an email from someone saying, can I still have a cameo on board Sailor Twain? So this interaction with the readers, I think what was a profound thing about it for me personally was that, you know, as anybody who writes a long book or works on a long project of that kind can tell you, it's a lonely craft, and you know, the solitude of the writer produces all kinds of interesting neuroses. And instead of that, here I was, after about 4.5 years working very much alone, being received every Monday, Wednesday, Friday with a new page and comments and discussions. And then, you know, when I put the readers into the story as cameos on board the ship, you know, and I would dress them up in top hats and monocles and bustles and corsets, and they would then take that picture and use it as their avatar, and then they would use that on Facebook, and then so it started spilling out into the real world in all kinds of unexpected ways, and that was magical. And now there's been an exhibit at the New York Public Library called Sailor Twain's New York, with a mix of original art and some of the research and maps, old maps and archives. And there's all kinds of people from the Hudson Valley. It's a love letter to the Hudson River in part. And so there are all these Hudson Valley people that came out of the woodwork. You know, there's the award-winning Hudson Valley wine comes from Millbrook Winery. They produce 2 Sailor Twain wines. And I've always wanted to do a wine label, and I got to do 2 of them. One of them called River Maiden, one of them called Secret of the Hudson. There was like a professor from Vassar, a professor in Poughkeepsie there, that was sending me reams of 19th century poetry about the river, and that would work its way into the blog. And you know, so all kinds of stuff that I could never have predicted started happening from doing this webcomic, and it was just, that was a revelation to me. I'm Mark Siegel, and you are watching bookbliss.com.